And the good thing is I get to figure out how to work the clicker. It's awesome to be here. I had this spot last year, and it's always the best spot to end the conference with, at least for this day. We'll talk about a journey to dispute mitigation, but from a very, very different perspective. I always live at the end of a lot of activities that led to a dispute. This slide right here, everybody in this room knows it. We've all put forth effort to try to curb disputes. We've tried to curb fraud, but it continues to rise, right? So if you look at the data at the top of the screen, we expect chargebacks to grow by 42%. Now we're only 2 years away from being able to reach 337 million disputes. Along with that, $28.1 billion in fraud, a 40% increase. So keep those in mind as we start to look at what are the things that I think about from tackling both of these issues. This next little box out to the side, we don't talk about too often, but it's the whole thing of unintentional friendly fraud, right? 24% of people surveyed said they didn't recognize a transaction, and yours truly has a little startup. And I don't do that many transactions on my business card, but I was doing my books this weekend, and half the transactions I could not recognize the merchant's name and required me to go back into the receipts to figure it out. So it continues to be a problem. Now I'm gonna change gears. Now this slide, I don't want you to think about everything here, but it sets the stage, right? So go over here to the left in the analog box. By the way, I wasn't in the payments business at that time, but I'm old as dirt and I can remember this era very, very well, right? We had paper drafts. Local thieves took the carbon copies and then committed fraud. But if you look at the trend as you go across, it was usually a couple of threat vectors that we at MasterCard had to respond to, or we worked with our partners in the business to be able to deal with those, right? So it goes along, but this is what we're faced with over the last 3 years, right? The threat vectors have just accelerated beyond our own capabilities, whether it's person-to-person fraud, bots, first-party fraud, right? It takes a lot. We can't any longer build products to respond to this. So we either look at acquisitions, and MasterCard's made some key acquisitions I'll talk about in a second, but more importantly for me, I love the partnerships that we have within cyber and intelligence to work with folks that have technologies and that we work together. So I try to think of the world not in box 6 where I live on a day-to-day basis, but really start to think about the first 2 boxes. To me, they're the most important boxes of all, right? If I'm an acquirer, do I know the merchant I'm onboarding? Do I know the business they're in? Do I really feel comfortable with the risks I'm doing? It doesn't change if you're a merchant, right? It's that first onboarding that's there. We have solutions. We acquired a company by the name of Risk Recon that does cybersecurity scanning, and that was acquired in 2021. Box number 2 is the workhorse, and it's where all my friends in this audience that I'll highlight in just a second live. So we've bought a couple of companies, Akata and New Data Security. They help identify risk, but in addition, in conjunction with our partner solutions. Once you get on to box 3, right, the transaction's done. Now we're just trying to take out those threats little by little. If it's digital receipts, it's now getting to that point of that I'm looking at a consumer like myself that may not recognize a transaction. Let me give them a little bit more detail about the purchase. Let me give them an HTML rendering of a receipt that they can take a look at. We'll talk about first-party trust in a little bit. I hinted at it last year. Now they're actually letting me talk about it without firing me. And then, of course, you have collaboration and then disputes. Ithaca is where I spend my time. And what everybody thinks about, if you're experienced with Ithaca, is they think about Ithaca alerts and connecting issuers to merchants to be able to resolve disputes. But why MasterCard made that acquisition is they had powerful technology that fuels all of these boxes, 3, 4, and 5. So I look at them as a technology company more than product. So this kind of looks like, I don't know, a NASCAR. I'm a Southern guy from Atlanta. This looks like a NASCAR image right here with all the companies here. But we can't be successful, you can't be successful unless we all work together. And instead of us going into our own individual areas, if I'm thinking about fraud, think about the entire paradigm, right? I love the side, I love working with our partners, and we join forces with them. Count. I don't know if Nisha's in the room and her team, but we've always thought of Count from a fraud standpoint. But as a result of the Equifax transaction, they now play in identity. So now they're an identity solution. Mark Bongers from WebShield. He does a lot of work for us on the back end in terms of participating alerts, but he's got an onboarding regulatory platform that we need. It's not something that MasterCard can bring, so we can bring that in as we're talking to an acquirer or potential merchant. Now, this is the workhorse, fraud prevention. This is where everything happens. I won't do Brittany any justice when I talk about SIFT, but and just because I haven't worked with them enough. But when you take a look at what they do, one of the things that was really important to me, Brittany, when I looked is not only worried about the financial risk, but the risk to the merchant in terms of abuse of their brand and everything like that. That's a step in a different direction that sometimes gets handled by other providers. The folks at Riskified, great MasterCard partner. What really is important to me when I think about Riskified is they've got tons of data, and then they homegrown their platform to be able to pull those risks out. And then Forwarder is end to end. Like everybody touches it, but they'll take you from authorization all the way to chargebacks. But what happens here to me is the most essential step, because now you start to go post-transaction, and now I'm trying to catch up to what's already taken place. So I already told you that I live in box number 6. But I start with number 6 when I start to talk about Chargeback 911, Monica's company, Dispute Help, SIFT is there, Mitigator. We all started there fighting chargebacks, trying to put chargeback management platforms in with acquirers. But what you start to realize is everybody's gone upstream to try to take those threat vectors and push those out. You notice I don't have any partners in first-party misuse. They'll be there soon as we roll that thing out. So I want to say to you, it's important that we all work together as we look at those things. So now we're in my world. So I did take you back to chargebacks, even though I said I didn't really want to take you there. But last February, we rolled out acquire collaboration within MasterCard. We decided that we wanted to take a 2-product approach. We made a huge investment in Ithaca. We had the technology. They're at the routing. Every time there is either a dispute initiated on Mastercom or an alert in Ithaca, it comes into Ithaca, and we try to solve that within Ithaca's network before we push it out to Mastercom. I'm not going to read all this. If you all want the presentation, just let me know. I'll send it out to you. There's nothing proprietary in there, or they wouldn't let me talk. But Ithaca is a brand agnostic solution. MasterCard, Visa, American Express, and now we're starting to move into some of the cards coming out of Asia Pacific. So it gives a merchant, it gives an acquirer for their merchants the opportunity to be able to route alerts and resolve those ahead of other branded solutions. MasterCard was a branded solution for a purpose, right? If somebody wanted to only resolve MasterCard disputes. I would tell you that it fits a very similar profile of merchants. There's 2 types. I'm chargeback concerned. There's a reason I want to get those refunds processed, or if I have billing friction with dealing with customers, that are the ones that tend to develop or adopt collaboration. Ithaca, one of the things I love about this platform, in addition to being settlement, they have the ability with their issuers to send you an alert, add authorization, and then you can look at that, you can respond to that, you can reverse out the authorization, and hopefully stop that shipment of good. So that was one of the key features that we bought with them that wasn't in the marketplace. I'm going to jump to the bottom. And to me, this is the most important piece. We took every single issuer that was connected to Mastercom, 6,000 issuers that were connected to Ithaca, and all of those alerts and notifications come into Ithaca, and we either solve it within Ithaca or we push it on to Mastercom. So we're continuing to build this. I would tell you that there's a lot of ISOs, there's a lot of acquirers that play in spaces where you tend to have more billing friction, and that's where that fits, and that's why it sits at the end of the funnel. All right, last 2 slides. Last year, I couldn't talk about what we were doing first-party fraud. This year, I'm happy to say that in October, as a matter of fact, October 27th, my birthday, we are going to release first-party trust. It'll be released in the U.S. market first. It'll only apply to domestic card, not e-commerce transactions, and will only apply to reason code 37 chargebacks. It will give us some good learnings in terms of what's there. I'm not going to go through everything on the slide. There's 2 key points I want you to be able to know. 2 paths to be able to connect to me. One is using the 3DS rails and MasterCard Identity Check, And the piece of that is if you want to send me every single transaction and let me store it and then respond to a dispute on your behalf, then we'll do that. If you don't, and you want to be more prescriptive about responding, then you'll adopt Consumer Clarity, which is our digital receipts product. We're using those railroad tracks to tell you that there is a qualifying first-party trust dispute, and then you can pass me those additional data elements. So it gives you two options to be able to look based on your operating environment. Are you connected to one of these platforms already? And then where do these data elements reside in your platform, and how easy is it to respond? So, talked about it already. Liability shift to issuers. If you have a disputed e-commerce transaction, reason code 37 chargeback, and you have two previous transactions that were between 120 and 365 days old, and they fit this criteria over here on that side that go there, right? You talk about device identity, delivery factor, and additional identity factors. Now, I talked to somebody earlier today about Europe, right? As we built this thing, everybody's like, it's a strong customer authentication market. Is there a play for first-party trust there? And I've had Keith Briscoe from the MRC. I talked to the guys at Chargeback 911. I spent some time with a couple of consultants this morning. We think that there is a play here, and that we think that there's some use cases here that will fit. I would hope that as we go into 2025, we get to talk a lot more about what does this mean to Europe? How do we deal with merchant-initiated transactions when it's a subscription merchant and the merchant's not tackling that? But I wanted to make sure this year is that I at least planted the seed, that it's coming. It'll be here in October. We'll get a lot of good learnings as we start to roll out from that standpoint. So that's the end of my comments.